Hey, and welcome to futurethinkers.org, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and consciousness. I'm Mike Gilliland.
And I'm Yuvia Ivanova. If you're new to the show and you want to get a list of our favorite books, popular episodes, and to join our community, go to futurethinkers.org/start.
Hey guys, this is part 2 of our interview with Charles Eisenstein, author and speaker. In this part, we talk about the gift economy, the assumptions it rests upon, possible effects on society, and how to create conditions for changing our economic system.
You can find all the links and show notes by going to futurethinkers.org/82, or if you're watching on YouTube, they will be under this video. If you haven't seen or heard part 1 of this interview, you can go to futurethinkers.org/81. A quick announcement before we start. Mike and I are working on designing some courses, and we'd like to get feedback from you guys on what you'd like to learn from us. So go to futurethinkers.org/courses and fill out our quick survey. It'll really help us out. Enjoy the episode.
So what has you most excited about the future that you're observing taking place now? Any kind of developments, technologies, movements, ways of thinking?
Well, on a really practical level, it's the regenerative agriculture movement. I talked about that before, to heal the soil and heal the water. If you're talking about adapting to the future, so much of the damage that is attributed to climate change is actually caused by land degradation. For example, floods and droughts. And I'm not saying that global climatic patterns are not also a factor, but when you cut down the forests, the rains stop coming, and the water can't soak into the water table. So you have floods and droughts. And I could go through like some of the hydrological research that I did for my book, but I'm not sure if I want to go into that level of detail right now. But just to say that the most important thing that we need to do right now, in alignment with a living planet future rather than a dead planet future, is to protect and restore life and be the servant of life and recognize ourselves as life, helping create the conditions for life. That's not the way that civilization has been thinking. Life outside of ourselves has been treated as a resource to serve us. That's the basic mindset of domestication, even. So a partnership paradigm needs to take over. So yes, so serving life, creating conditions for life first means protecting whatever pristine ecosystems still exist. Top priority is the Amazon, Congo, and whatever's left in Borneo and Sumatra and Indonesia, which has been heavily degraded. But anywhere where there's pristine nature that still carries the memory of health, the Gaian memory of health. Because if it's preserved in those few places, then it can still emanate out from those places. There's still a reservoir, a memory of health. So that's top priority. And then second priority then is to restore, regenerate, revitalize, repair what's been damaged. And that can be done through marine preserves. There's proposals out there to make vast areas of the ocean off limits to fishing, and whaling, all that kind of stuff. And then regenerative agriculture and reforestation, and done in intimate relationship with nature and not through scaled up tree planting campaigns and things like that. Like, how do you know what tree needs to be planted where? That knowledge only comes through close study over years or even generations. So it means involving place-based people. So that's just one. Well, that's two of the you asked me what's the most exciting thing happening. So people who are doing that and staking their lives on it, that's what moves my heart. And then in the social sphere and the political sphere too, there's kind of truth and reconciliation, restorative justice, ways of seeking social change that are not tapping into the narrative of the people on the other side are horrible and let's defeat them. Let's shame them. Let's arouse judgment and indignation against them as bad people in order to tear them down. But really like deep peace-based social change initiatives. Yeah, like most of the stuff that excites me is quite marginal today. And a lot of the things that people think are innovative and new and changing the world are in hidden ways still part of the old story. Like I could talk about cryptocurrencies, for example. And I don't know if that was on the list of questions, but that would be one way in which there is the seed of something new that when people see it, they have that feeling I was talking about before of homecoming, of here it is. Here's something that echoes my whisper to myself. And so people really latch onto it, maybe sometimes not seeing the ways that their idealism has been hijacked into something that is the old story in disguise. But there is something there too.
That's been a challenging one for me, is to recognize where I'm kind of perpetuating old problems or ways of thinking that I thought I had gotten over, and then I'm just kind of believing the disguised version of the old story. It's hard to know.
Like what?
Well, probably not completely relevant for this podcast, but a lot of business questions where I'm pursuing trying to get money, and the way I get money, this is in the past, but the way I get money was just kind of it was out of a lack mentality, and it was trying to get something quick without earning it and without it being in line with my life purpose. That's been a recurring theme in most of my early 20s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the paradigm of extracting something from the world by force imbues our economic system. And the basic business plan is you create something and then withhold it from people unless they pay you for it. So it's a kind of power position over somebody else. It's like they don't have to buy it, but maybe they do have to buy it. Maybe they want it so much, and how much do you want it? Well, you're only going to have it if you pay this much. Well, you don't want it that much? Okay, well, pay a little less. So it's like deeply oppositional, that relationship, which is in economic theory, which, page 1, all humans seek to maximize their rational self-interest. So that intrinsically oppositional relationship, I mean, you can see its relationship to the hero's journey, and to human opposition to nature. It's like part of the same paradigm where you extract with force from somebody else. That stands in contrast to gift economics and gift culture, where and this is in pretty much every pre-capitalistic culture, where your well-being, your economic well-being, is not about how much you own and how much you control. It's about how much you give. Because the more you give, the more gratitude you generate in your community, and the more people will give to you and take care of you too. So in gift culture, it's not true that more for me is less for you. It's not true that your well-being and my well-being are separate, because your well-being means you'll have more to give to me, or to give to somebody who gives to somebody who gives to me. So economic life reflects the spiritual truth that we're all connected. So the gift is, if you ask like, what is a gift? What distinguishes a gift from some other kind of transaction? It comes down to trust. It comes down to not forcing a return, which is why if you go buy something in the store, you don't say that they gave me the carton of milk and I gave them money. Because once they give you that carton of milk, if you don't give them money, if you say, oh, thanks, bye, they did not actually give it to you, because then they will call the police and you will be forced, ultimately by physical force, to render up the money. So I'm just stating the obvious here. That's not a gift. A gift is when there's some kind of release, some kind of letting go, some kind of trust. I give it to you, and I don't know how that gift is going to circulate back. I might have a reasonable expectation that it will. If I give you a birthday gift, then probably you're going to give me a birthday gift on my birthday. But I can't say exactly what that's going to be. And I'm not going to sue you if your gift is of different value than mine. Although in gift culture, you might be seen in your giving, and people will learn whether you're generous or not. And so there might be separate selfish advantages to being generous. But it's not about fighting selfishness in order to be generous. It's about unifying selfishness and generosity through culture. So, yeah, long story short, I like to, in my work, and offering this to other people too, there are often steps we can take away from the force-based economic mentality and toward a gift-based economic mentality. Those steps are not available to everybody. Like if you work for a large corporation, you've got a contract. Like they're not going to necessarily be very flexible on you working by gift. But in a lot of especially like online stuff, online programs and things like that, like I do mine by gift. And some people pay what they would pay for a typical online course. Some people pay just a few bucks. Some people pay nothing. And I'm probably not making as much money as I would if I charged like, $300 a person and said, sorry, this is so great that you're going to be missing out if you don't pay, but we have an early bird special and like all that. Like that doesn't feel good. That's not the signal I want to put out in the world. So, yeah. So anyway, I made a course about this called Living in the Gift. That it's not just about money and economics. It goes way beyond that, but it's my attempt to share some of the knowledge and ways of seeing that enable a successful next step into gift. And like I don't know what your business model is, but I'm not going to keep talking about that because I'm not even sure like how relevant it is to you. But we could talk more about it if you want.
Well, I would be interested to know what the breakdown was. I mean, we don't have to talk about this on the show, but I mean, to me, it is interesting. It's an interesting model to observe what happens when people can just give whatever they want. Are you able to survive on that? And I mean, how generous do people end up being?
Well, I mean, I've got a team of 5 or 6 people working with me, and they're all in gift too. So it's we're able to everyone's survived so far. Here we are. Here I am. But also, it's about like another aspect of gift is that if the inflow of gifts is really strong, that's a signal from the universe that what I'm offering is welcome and given well and given to the right person. And if I'm not receiving that influx of gifts, what do I do with that? I could say, well, people are just stingy. Or I could say, I'm not quite offering the right thing. Because if I were, then there would be a lot more gratitude. Like gratitude can be a guideline of whether you're giving well. Sometimes you give something to somebody and they're ungrateful, and shame on them, right? But it could be that I was using a gift in a dominating way. And then when they didn't want the obligation that gift would create, they refused the gift, and now I'm feeling offended by it. Like maybe that's not what they really wanted. Like imagine if you, this is a thing I think I'm going to say in my course. Like, what if you go to baking school and you become a baker, and you open a bakery in town, and you do it by gift. Pay whatever you feel is right for this bread, and people come in and they're not given very much money, and you're like, people in this town are really stingy. But maybe it's that your bread isn't very good yet, and they're just being polite and giving you a couple bucks. And then you gain your skill, and then you open a new bakery in gluten-freeville, not realizing that it's gluten-freeville, and you're trying to offer your bread by gift, and still no one's very grateful for it. So one aspect of gift is that the universe is generous, and that the response of a person or of a community or of a group of people or of the world to your offerings is a way to guide you toward more effective giving and toward healing the parts of yourself that get in the way of being effective as a giver. So we're not at war with the universe. So long story short, again, when I offer something by gift and there's not a lot of generosity, it's not like I always go to, okay, blame myself, but it's like, what is this signaling? Have I really offered it as a gift? Or is my languaging subtly designed to create guilt in those who don't give back? If I do that, I'm not in gift, not as fully as I could be. I'm still in coercion, and the results will demonstrate that. My stinginess will be reflected back at me. So there's a step of courage required here. That's always true of a genuine gift. There's a little bit of trust that's needed. And so it's a practice from where we are now in this society to step into that trust. Like, I'm not even saying just like go 100%. I mean, there are predators out there. There are people who will take advantage of your trust. So it's not indiscriminate. I was just at my parents' house. They have a landline. They're getting like 5 or 10 calls a day from various kinds of scammers, some more legitimate than others, selling insurance, the Police Brotherhood Association wanting their donations, all the way down to calls of, Grandma, I'm stranded in Mexico. I need you to wire me some money, from someone who's not their grandson. They're getting this is not a perfect world. And so teachings about gift are not like a suggestion that you let yourself be exploited. So there's a lot more. That's why I made a whole course on it. Just the stance of gift is a bit foreign to anyone who's grown up in this culture.
I'm interested in that. I want to check that out.
Mm-hmm. It seems that a lot of the kind of natural, or maybe not natural, but a lot of the pro-social aspects of tribal societies have been lost as we scaled our civilization. They were maybe easier to practice in a group of 150 people where you knew everybody intimately and your reputation traveled and stayed with you your whole life. And now we live in this huge society where people are anonymous, and even if you're openly screwing people over, you can just move into a different industry or change your name or go into a different part of the world, and that's basically erased, and you can just continue doing what you're doing.
That's right. Yeah. And that's the challenge of our time, is how do we translate whatever it is, gift culture or anything else from indigenous communal times, how do we translate that into a mass society? It's a question that I don't think anyone has the answer to. But again, it's the right question to be asking. And there are hints of answers. On social media, for example, your reputation does kind of follow you. There are technological ways to attach a person to a history and a reputation. With blockchain currencies, money itself can become no longer generic, but every unit of money has a history, which is how it was in gift culture. Like a gift of, say, a blanket or an arrow or something like that. It wasn't the same as just some other blanket or some other arrow, because it came from a certain person and it had a story attached to it. So there are technological ways that we can restore some of the social conditions that allow gift culture to work. I don't think we have a full answer, but there are hints of an answer. And by the way, I don't believe in Dunbar's number, but anyway, but I get your point.
As far as compelling people to be more giving, it's funny actually. So we have a friend who is an ayahuasca shaman, and he talks about shaman sickness. And so this is what happens when a shaman, goes through his journey to become a shaman, and then he isn't giving back to the world. And he becomes deeply psychologically distressed. And this is a really common thing that happens. And so it's like there's something internal when you go and investigate the nature of reality and the nature of yourself deeply enough, there's something within you that compels you to give. And if you don't follow that, you get very psychologically sick.
Right. Stuck in the hero part of the journey.
I'm curious to hear more about your thoughts on basic income. I mean, from a very practical standpoint, I've heard a lot of people say a lot of good things about it and a lot of people saying a lot of bad things about it. And I can't figure out what the societal consensus is on it. What are your thoughts on it? And as far as how it can be implemented, and what do you think the peripheral benefits would be to society if we did install it?
I'm happy to go there, but I feel like there's some dangling energy from UV's thing about her what she was saying about shaman sickness. Want to tie that up first. What were you saying right before that, UV, about the shaman sickness? You were making some other point and then segued into that.
Well, that when a person investigates their own nature very, very deeply, that something inside them very strongly compels them to give. And if they don't follow that urge, they become sick.
Yeah. And again, you could apply that to the whole society, couldn't you? Like our society has become profoundly sick. And perhaps one way to look at it is that it is because we are not giving in equal measure to what we've received. Giving and receiving have to be in equal measure. Otherwise, either you get depleted if you're giving more, or you get bloated and stagnant if you're receiving more than you're giving. And I would say bloated and stagnant is a pretty good description of our civilization right now.
We were thinking the other day about how to create more meaning in a person's life, because we get this question quite often. And that was one of the things that we mentioned is, well, first of all, a person has to be growing all the time. Otherwise, they just become depressed. And the second thing is that they need to be giving.
Okay, yeah. I remember something else that came up when you were speaking before, and I'll relate it to this. When you said something about how do we compel people to give, and I detected a hint of irony in your voice when you said that, because obviously...
She's not the compelling type.
Yeah, that's not really...
That's more me.
Gift either. So,
I'm the stick, she's the carrot.
So it's really more about holding somebody in the story that they want to give, that they are here to give. That, as you were saying, that if they do not give, they will become sick. and that this is why you're here, to give. Because the story that we hold somebody in is an invitation for them to live into that story. So what were you just saying now that I was going to relate it to?
Giving and growing.
Growing, that's right, giving and growing, yes. I guess that depends on how you conceive of growing. We have, again, a culture that is obsessed with growth and obsessed with youth and preservation, which is all part of the paradigm of control. Our economy depends on endless growth. So I wonder about what about embracing other parts of the cycle besides the growth phase? What about the steady state phase? What about the decay phase? So maybe instead of growth, we would say that we need to embrace transition, change, evolution, metamorphosis. And in each stage, the types of gifts that come forth from us naturally and that we need to come into us are different. So a young person, has lots of energy, can do lots of work, is on it and has a certain kind of gift to offer. An older person like my mother, mostly right now, what she offers is just this incredible loving presence. And people have to take care of her. And so she needs certain kinds of gifts and gives another kind of gift. So when we hold ourselves in the story of I am here to give, not needing to compel ourselves, but knowing that of ourselves, then the question that is born is, what is mine to give right now? What feels like the right gift? What is the listening organ of my heart telling me is the right gift right now?
As far as growing, yeah, you're totally right. I think that in our society, people are obsessed with this very specific type of growing, kind of the physical expansion of their realm, as we talked about on the scale of civilization as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a different kind of growing as well, where you expand your own sense of self to include everything. You expand your sense of self to include nature, to include the planet, to include the universe. That's a different kind of growth as well.
Yeah. I think that might be a good way to look at it. Growing in your connections, growing in your relationships, and maybe another way to look at it would even be that you're recovering lost parts of the self, or awakening to lost parts of yourself. But yeah, I like that, to grow in relationship, because that it's similar to what I was saying before about giving, like spreading out into the world as we get older, as the king and queen archetypes. In a way, it ties to universal basic income, even, where humanity is now sitting atop an enormous pile of wealth. I don't mean just money. I mean the accumulated ability through hundreds of years, thousands of years of technology to meet our needs easily. One of the arguments for universal basic income is that it takes less and less human labor to meet our material needs. In an economy that depends on consumption, on growth, and in which money only comes through producing goods and services, in order to keep everybody employed, if every person is producing goods and services more and more efficiently, so productivity per capita is increasing, in order to keep everybody employed, consumption per capita has to also increase at the same rate. So more and more productivity means more and more consumption in order for the current economy to function, in order to avoid mass unemployment. Another solution, instead of consuming more and more to absorb increasing productivity, another solution would be to work less and less and consume the same, or even consume less. So to enter into a steady state or degrowth economy. For that to work, people have to get money in some other way besides producing goods and services. And our whole financial system, the way that money is created, is basically through lending at interest to people or corporations who are going to produce more than they are already. That's why they can pay the interest on the loan. So money is lent to those who are going to produce even more goods and services. So the whole system is geared around growth. And the two things that need to change to live in a steady state and thrive in a steady state economy, because today thriving only happens in a growth economy under the current regime. So what has to change then is, one, the way that money is created, and two, the way that it is distributed. And these are related. These two problems are related. So to solve the latter problem, universal basic income is one way to do it, because it gives money to people without them having to produce goods and services. That frees them to produce goods and services that are not monetized. When I said goods and services before, by definition, it means things that are exchanged for money. But we could broaden goods and services to include intangible and qualitative things that are not easily marketable. For example, art and music. To some extent, they're marketable if you create artificial scarcity of them, but fundamentally, you can't put a price on beauty. Ecological healing is another one. I know people who are guerrilla healers, guerrilla watershed restorers. They go into state forests and build check dams on streams, totally illegally. They're not getting paid for this. People like that need support, and they're not going to be producing anything that they can sell. So, like you were saying, Mike, there's what creativity is unleashed with universal basic income is exactly what the world needs right now. The only way that universal basic income does not make sense is if you believe that human beings are fundamentally lazy and self-interested. And if you subsidized your life and you weren't forced to work, if you weren't forced to work by money pressure, you wouldn't work. Why would you work? You just sit around watching football, drinking your beer. I know you. That's who you are. You don't give a shit. You're not called to care for the world. You're just looking out for numero uno. I know you. That's the story of human nature, from which universal basic income seems ridiculous. So it comes down to, what are we inviting people into, and what story do we stand in? Giving someone universal basic income actually telegraphs an invitation to them. It says, I know you. If I support you, you'll do the right thing. You'll do beautiful things. And it is a gift it really is a gift in the sense of a release of control and a trust, because maybe what you do need to do for your healing is to do nothing. Maybe you need to rest. Maybe you need to deprogram from a life of being coerced into work that you hate. Maybe that goes all the way back through your schooling, filling out those worksheets in third grade, one math problem after another. And I hate this, but if I don't do it, the teacher's going to yell at me. Mom's going to yell at me. I'm going to get a bad grade. That programming runs deep. And I think that a lot of people might need to be supported for a few years to deprogram from that. If that's what you need, is to drink beer every day for 3 years, probably you're going to do it anyway, So, yeah, so what I'm saying is that it is deeply in the spirit of gift, because it's unconditional. So those are like some philosophical levels of it. Practically speaking, it would entail enormous changes in society. The people who say that society as we know it would not function are right, because you would not be able to compel people to do degrading, dangerous, tedious work just because they have to do it to survive. So you would have to redesign the whole economy. If you were an industrial engineer or a systems engineer, you would have to take into account that you can't make people do these jobs. You have to make them somehow engaging, dignified. So it would be a design constraint. And it's not that you would have nobody driving buses or cleaning toilets or something like that. Like, I've done work like that before. And at a certain phase of my life, it was a balm to the spirit. Like I needed to wash dishes for a while.
There is something very therapeutic about that, you know? I used to love some of those jobs where I just put in headphones and I'd wash dishes and, you know, I'd learn something.
Right. It's only oppressive if it's your career.
Yeah.
But if it's like a summer job for a while or like in a transition phase of life, you know? So it's not like we'd have an economy with no tedious labor, but there would be way less of it. Everything would have to change. So it is a huge, huge shift. And as for how to fund it, it gets down back to this pile of wealth that we're sitting on, and not just human wealth, but natural wealth too. Which human being is more entitled to the benefits of Nikola Tesla's inventions than another human being? This is part of our collective heritage, our collective patrimony. No one is more entitled to it than everyone gets a dividend from this pile of wealth. That's the moral justification for it. Everyone gets a dividend from the wealth of land and culture and technology. And that leads to how to fund it. It should be funded through, you could say, taxes or rent payments for anyone who is benefiting or through ownership of this inheritance and natural wealth. So basically, that comes down to a tax on money and a tax on land, and maybe some other things too. But basically, it's money and land. The land part was developed by Henry George, and the money part by Silvio Gesell. And it's not an income tax. It's a built-in negative interest rate on money itself, specifically, and implemented through a liquidity fee on bank reserves. So basically, a built-in negative interest rate on money. And I won't go through the whole theory of it right now, but basically, it recognizes that money is only valuable because of a web of social agreements and a history of creativity and productivity. So if you have $1 billion, it's not actually your money. It's not only your money, its value is created by society. Therefore, you should have to pay society a royalty on that value of, say, 5%. So the roadmap that I put in Sacred Economics, which is a book I wrote that covers some of this stuff, is basically the next financial crisis comes along, and instead of having a creditor's bailout like we had before, we have a debtor's bailout, which means that a central financial authority purchases all of the debt and either cancels it outright or cuts the interest rates to 0 or less. And the money that it uses to purchase this debt from financial institutions bears a negative interest rate. So this bailout coincides with a cutting of interest rates to -5% or something like that. And anyway, like this, for you to even follow me, you'd have to have thought a lot about alternative economics. So I'm mainly just saying this for the nerds out there, but also hopefully to signal that it's not a half-baked idea, that a lot of thought has gone into it, not just from me. And I mean, we would have to have a whole program on this if we wanted to go more into it. It's a big topic, and I've kind of let it languish for a while. I haven't written anything on it for a long time. Um, Sometimes I have the feeling of stirring too many pots, having too many pots on the stove right now.
What would be some of the your favorite resources if people wanted to dive into that deeper?
There's a couple recent books, I think, on universal basic income, but I just haven't kept up with the field. I wrote a book, Sacred Economics, that came out in like 2011 that has a whole chapter on it. Since then, though, my enthusiasm for the idea has grown. So if I rewrote that book, I would put even more in there. Yeah, so many layers of why it's a good idea.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to an idea that you talked about as part of what people would be likely doing with their time. And I think there's just this assumption about what is a productive activity that permeates our whole society, and it's fundamentally wrong. These kinds of healing activities or restorative activities are often not considered to be productive activities unless they are packaged as healing, spa retreats or whatever.
But then you're incentivized to want repeat customers if we're talking about doctors and that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so they're not incentivized to provide any kind of long-term well-being. It's more of a band-aid solution. But what about, like spending time with people who care about you? That's a profoundly restorative activity. And there's such a deep lack of that in our society right now. People are literally dying of loneliness. Like a quarter of the Western population is clinically depressed.
Yeah.
The ones who are quote unquote making it are working, insane hours. That's some of our friends back home. We cannot see them because their schedules are so packed. And then people who aren't making it are depressed and want to be in those other friends' shoes. Yeah.
It's a huge paradox that we have such a scarcity of time. Not enough time to like really take a long afternoon with your grandmother or your parent, who's declining, or a child, like got to ship them off to daycare. That is a kind of wealth that, looking through that lens, we see that our society is poor, especially compared to earlier societies, where even going back to hunter-gatherers, where there's well-known research now that they on average spent 20 hours a week on subsistence. The struggle to survive was not much of a struggle. 20 hours a week to, quote, make a living, spending inordinate amounts of time dancing, singing, lovemaking, playing with children, talking, gossiping, telling stories. Like, life was pretty darn good. There was more physical discomfort sometimes, but we were tougher too. Comfort, as they say, enters the house as a guest and soon becomes the master. So, and even if today, like if you go to less developed parts of the world where they do not have all of the labor-saving devices that we have, paradoxically, they are not therefore more busy. They have more time for you. They have more time for their loved ones. How do we recover that kind of wealth? Is it by doing even more of the same, by inventing even more labor-saving devices? If I only had a digital assistant to do all the things that are taking me so much time, then I could be less busy. I mean, that way of thinking that goes back hundreds of years. Labor-saving devices were supposed to liberate us from the drudgery of labor. And futuristic writings from the 19th century are predicting the 3-day work week. This has been around for a long time. And leisure in America peaked in 1973. That was the peak of per capita leisure. So I don't think that it's one more invention around the corner. And one of the, I mean, this takes us back to the whole universal basic income thing. The economy doesn't work with more and more leisure. We have to make it work. And then, like you were saying, like, what about the things that you can't quantify? Like you could say, yeah, healing, let's make that a category, but what about quality time with someone you love? What about being there for a friend? What about taking care of an injured animal, or bringing life back to some soil that's been damaged? Like, are we going to be able to quantify everything and pay people for everything?
Or what about walking in nature and just feeling more connected? That's very restorative as well. Can't quantify that.
Yep. Either like one path is that we try to control everything and improve life by bringing more and more under control. Like, maybe we could quantify the benefits that derive from walks in nature and add that to your budget, add that to your schedule. And you should make sure to get at least 13 minutes of that in. Like, remedying the deficiencies of our way of life with more of the same. That's one path. And the other path is to release control in many areas of life, to demonetize life, to shrink the realm of money. I'm not an advocate of abolishing money completely, but it's just like the hero's journey, returning it to its proper domain, returning that archetype, that way of thinking, that way of relating to its proper domain, which means economic degrowth. It means a shrinking of the realm of goods and services. And that takes me back to sacred economics. How do you make that work without mass unemployment and economic collapse?
Yeah, it seems like restoring trust between people also is a big part of it, because this pervasiveness of economic relations between people has destroyed what originally was mediated by trust. And now, this is one way that we can engage with strangers, but it has also erased trust in the relationships that were supposed to be intimate.
Right. And so some of the distrust in our current condition is healthy and necessary, perhaps. And some of it is a habit that does not always serve. And some of it also comes from an ideology about human nature that's not true. It becomes true, like the ideology that everyone's in it for themselves. It becomes true or truer in current economic circumstances. For example, when I buy an airplane ticket, I choose the cheapest one, or whatever, like taking into account, is it a direct flight, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, faced with two options that are the same, I choose the cheapest one. I don't think, oh, but if I pay a little bit more, then that airline will be able to pay its employees more, and so maybe I should choose that one. Like, this automatic behavior, like, I'm an example of I'm in it for myself, maximizing self-interest. This is natural behavior in our current condition. So the ideology of self-interest becomes true in the systems that are built on that ideology. However, when we recognize that self-interested behavior is in large part a product and an artifact of the system, then we become able to see the part of a person that is prior to that ideological overlay, prior to that conditioning, to see the part of the person that is not self-interested, the part of the person that wants to be generous, that wants to be of service, that wants to create something beautiful with their lives and their energy, that wants to give, that is a good person, an altruistic person. Like, we can see that. When we see that, we can engage that. And our habits of distrust get in the way. So yeah, there's definitely situations where I'm not going to be like totally open and vulnerable and get attacked and exploited. When I go to the used car lot or something like that, like, I'm there's there's some guardedness that is appropriate there. But in so many situations, that habit is not useful. So there's a big next step that we can all take. And part of that is to cast off the ideology of separate selves competing for their benefit in a hostile universe. That is an ideology. So let's dissolve that so that our ideology no longer is an enemy of gift and of trust.
Any other questions?
Any closing words?
Well, I just would express my appreciation for your wonderful questions and your deep listening, and for doing this highly lucrative work in the world. That's a joke.
Oh, we know.
But
it's just not very funny. That's all. It's really not funny. But it's a good, yeah.
Well, it does enrich people's lives, hopefully.
But yes, but thank you for doing this and exploring the boundaries, and being willing to fail.
Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, this was the second part of our two-part interview with Charles Eisenstein. Make sure to check out the links to books, courses, and other resources on the show notes page at futurethinkers.org/82.
If you're watching on YouTube, you can find all of that information under this video. And if you want to stay up to date with our latest episodes, blog posts, or news from Future Thinkers, join our mailing list at futurethinkers.org/mailing list. To meet like-minded people, join our Future Thinkers Discord community. Go to futurethinkers.org/discord.
This episode is brought to you by Qualia, a nootropic supplement that helps support mental performance and mood. To get 10% off, use the code FUTURE at checkout. And to learn more about neurohacking, visit futurethinkers.org/neuro.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified of new videos. You can also follow us on social media to stay connected. If you'd like to get a t-shirt like the new Make America Think Again, go to futurethinkers.org/store. If you like what we do and you want to help us make more podcasts and videos, consider donating or becoming a patron at futurethinkers.org/support. Also visit our sponsor Qualia and use the coupon code FUTURE to get 10% off your purchase.